Hello everyone, today I'll be talking about the device authorization flow. It's one of my favorite flows on the OAuth 2 series / OpenID because it's really elegant to handle something that it's difficult. Imagine that you have a device where you don't have an input, but you want somehow to provide authentication and authorization. You want this device to access something from you, which is the basic things about OpenID on the Auth 2 series. It's this delegation, but you don't have a way to authenticate on that device. So that's the fifth flow, and as I said previously, it's one of my favorite ones. So let's see some use cases and why it is necessary to create this flow. First, imagine that you have smart TVs, Internet of Things devices, command line interfaces, print scanners. And you can see the common denominator here is that you don't have, let's say, a good way to input something with your fingers to say, I want to write my username and password. And it's very difficult. Sometimes, of course, smart TVs, you can connect a keyboard and things like that, but sometimes there are devices in the Internet of Things that you need this device to connect to something or an API that you have, but you don't have a way to provide username and password on these devices. So you will need a second device where you will insert your username and password. And that is the reason that sometimes you see this flow to be the second screen experience, because you will use two different devices at the same time, more or less, to provide the authentication. So let's see how it works, and it will be quite simple for you to understand. So the actors are usually the common ones, but there is another one here. So we start with the user, which is you or me, and imagine, just for an example, that you have a smart TV. You don't have a way to write to the smart TV, but you want to use the YouTube there. And you want that YouTube to use your account. So you have your preference, you have your history, and you want to continue on TV, something that you are doing on a tablet or on your laptop and so on. So you are the user and you want this YouTube to connect or use your account. It means it needs to access the Google, and the YouTube on your application needs to access the Google and needs to access the API of YouTube. But if you use the first flow, you have a browser, you provide username and password, and then if you see my first video on this series, you'll understand how it works, and it's quite simple to understand. But in this way, you don't have a way to insert your username and password. So now you have the device, which will be the TV / YouTube on your TV. We have the authorization server, let's call it the Google in this, because it's the owner of YouTube. You have the resource server, meaning that your device / your application like YouTube needs to access, of course, the APIs from Google to collect information about you, to collect information about the videos and things like that. But now you need another one that we didn't saw in the other flows, which is a user agent, a separate device. And it will be on this device that you will provide your credentials. It should be a device where you confirm something. It's there are sometimes ways where you don't provide username and password. Maybe you see a number, maybe the TV will say something to you. Okay, go to your tablet and check the number that it's there and write it, or check the number that I'm providing here and click it there. There are different ways, but at the end of the day, you always need a second device that you own, or at least where you can provide something about you that only you knows about. So let's see a diagram to understand this with the steps. There are a lot of them, that's why it seems confused, but we have these numbers that I hope you're seeing. Let's start with the first one. So you go to the device, you open your TV, and the first thing that this device / YouTube application will do is just to request the device code. It goes to authorization server. In our example will be the Google. And if you already did that, or maybe you'll do it in the future, when you access the YouTube in a smart device, you will see a QR code with a code. And that's because the application went to the authorization server, which is Google, and the Google returned the device / user code plus an address. Sometimes this address is written on the screen, sometimes it's just a QR code with the address. So you can use our mobile, take the picture and take the picture, you just target the picture, you don't have to take it, but it can forward you to an address. So at this time, you already have a user code that only you knows about it, and you have an address where you can go. It will be the second device. That will be the place where you can prove that you are you, let's say. So that's the second step. On the third step, now you have this address, you use your camera or you write it, you go to any device, maybe your laptop, and after this code is shown to you and the address, you visit here on user agent, maybe a browser. Sometimes you can go probably directly to the YouTube application that you have in another device and you have to answer a question there. Sometimes there is some variance. So that's the first step. Now on the fifth, you submit the code that were sent to you by the device that you can show, because in device you will see two things. One is the address, the other it will be a code that you have to write. And sometimes this address already contains the code. Maybe you don't have to write it. So this code is submitted to the authorization server. And this authorization server now, using this submit code, understands which device asked for it. So you are using two devices at the same time, but you have something in common between them, which is the user code here, or the device code if you want. Okay, so it goes to authorization server. Oh, okay, I know who are you, so prove that you are you. So it will provide you a login or a /consent. Maybe it's you don't have to provide username and password, maybe because you're already authenticated on that device, but it can ask you a number or something additional to prove that you are you. Okay, and then you'll see on your browser, let's say that's username and password. You didn't log in first on the device. And now it's the common stuff that we saw on the previous flows, which is okay, provide username and password. It will validate you. You ask for specific permissions and it will consent or not, because remember that authorization server first received something from the device, and this request of course includes everything that it needs to access. So with the submit code, it is linked between them. It can ask you, okay, there is a device that's asking you to access your account, your profile, your picture, and the history of your videos and things like that. And you say, okay, I grant access on this 7th step to authorization server. Meanwhile, and of course you receive the confirmation you're on the user agent. Now, if you return to your Smart TV every X seconds, and I'll explain to you in a moment why, it's pinging the authorization server, waiting for you to finish your flow. And every 5 seconds, you say, or 10 seconds, depends. Usually it's configured on the authorization server. You say, it's already authenticated, it's already authenticated, it's already authenticated, until he has an answer. That's what you see here, poll for the token. And it's asking if it's already authenticated, give me the token and the refresh token, because with this token, it can access the research server, which should contain the API for the device to use your YouTube account and check your video. So it pulls, and at some point, on the 10th, it's a return access and refresh token when you authenticate. If you don't authenticate it correctly, or there is also an expiration time, it passes, of course, the device cannot access your YouTube account. But imagine that it was yes, okay, return access token, fresh token, and now the application can access the API with this token, and it can refresh whenever you want. So it calls the research server and receives the answer like it usually done by the other flows. So this is the flow. So the main point here is that you have one device that needs something, but you need another device to for you to approve that, because you have the limitation of not having a good way to provide your credentials or authentication to this device. So if you want, if you are interested on the details, so the first step, which means the device is asking something to the Google, which is your YouTube application. So you can see the post, you target the server, and then you provide the client ID. Of course, it should be registered on the authorization server, and what you want. In our case, it will be something like play media or others. I put here read photos because in the other flows, usually we were using a printer application that can access your photos on the Google. But the concept, it's the same. It's about the scopes. And the scopes, as you know, is a kind of the permissions that you are giving to a specific application in some APIs. I will address in future videos more about the scopes, what are the important ones, because some of them are required. But for now, just understand that when you have a user, you have permissions and roles. When you have a client, you have scopes, something like that. So now the server, of course, returns, and it will return this information. This is the code. Okay, this is the device code, and this is the user code. They are different, but this is the code that will link everything internally by Google, and this is usually the code that you have to provide on the second device. And of course, you need the address where you want to activate your application. It's quite common to see this on smart TVs. And then you have an expiration time, meaning after this time, these codes will be invalidated, and of course, you cannot use it later to try to authenticate tomorrow or something like that. after this time. And this is the interval about the polling when I was talking about this pinging from the device to the authorization server. Now on steps 3 and 5, you see the codes. User navigates to the address as we saw earlier, and user enters the code, meaning the user code. See this one. So this is the code that you have to write. This is the code that is shared between the requests. And now, okay, you just common stuff. You provide username and password, and you accept or not. Probably you'll see something allow or accept. Sometimes there are two buttons at the bottom of your mobile. And then if everything goes well, okay, you can see here the device, meanwhile, or your tube application is pinging or pulling for tokens. And you can see that you write this, you provide here the device code. That's the device that was generated on the first packet here. And you have the client ID, which is, and that's it. Okay. As I said previously, this is always the code that authorization server knows about it for your request, that it's always linked. Don't forget with this code, user code. So these two work together to make sure that this device is linked with a person that will be authenticated. Okay, it's kind of your temporary password until you provide username and password. And of course, then everything went well. You just receive the access token as the same way that you can see on the other flows. This is the token that will allow the YouTube application to access the Google API, to provide the videos and information to your data, the type of token, the expiration, the refresh token, and what can this application do in the APIs. That's the usual stuff on OAuth 2 and OpenID. And of course, steps 11 and 12 is the application accessing the API that was protected before, but now it's open again inside the scope, and that's why it's called scope. So if you want to see some code example, it's quite simple. This is Python, but you can read it if you know how to develop an application. So first it's start device authorization flow. So initiates the device authorization request, meaning that you have a payload, which is the client ID and scope. As we saw earlier, you provide client ID and scope. Remember, this client ID should already be created on the authorization server, and then you do the request, this post, and we'll receive, if everything went well, the packet that we saw. That's why you see the return of this that we'll use later. Now, remember that you receive an address and things like that, but at the same time, you need to create the pool for tokens. After you do that request, and while the user is providing the username and password in another device, you have to ping the authorization server, and you use the device code, the interval, and the expiration you will be using, and that's why you can see here a while. It seems a big code, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters it is this code. Okay, and this request, the other end is just a validation to check if everything ends well or not. If it's 200, great, I received the tokens. Otherwise, it means that it is waiting. If it's not the case, it will check if there was an error or not, and it will be trying. Most of them fail unless you have this authorization pending, meaning that his authorization server say, okay, I'm still waiting for the user to authenticate. But if the error is access denied or code expired, you just return and say, okay, it was not possible to do the flow. But if it's authorization pending, it means that we'll return again to this while. It sleeps for a specific interval that was defined earlier, and that's a cycle. It will end somehow when you reach the expiration or one of these errors happen. And of course, after you have the access token, you just do the request using, don't forget, the other authorization, bearer, and the token that you receive. Check if it was expired or not. If it's expired, of course, you have to do a request to the refresh token and receive a new one and continue to use on your application. But usually these kind of applications, they are already developed with that in mind. So you do it once and it continue until it is revoked on the server. You can always go to the authorization server like Google and revoke the token, and the application needs to activate everything all over again. So advantages of this device flow, I think it should be clear right now, but user-friendly for constrained device. It means it solves the problem of difficult input in certain device. When you have this difficulty, probably you want to use this flow. I remember that was once in a project, and we have an application, or we had an application that we want to allow the user to, let's say, receive an invitation with a QR code. And we should be able to access using this QR code. Of course, the application should allow this flow to happen. Otherwise, it will not be possible, because if you are providing a QR code, it means that I have a device and I need another device to prove who I am, something like that. So no browser on device needed. Of course, it's linked with the user-friendly or constrained device. That's the reason we use this flow. If you have a browser, you can use the first flow somehow, unless there are specific reasons to use this flow. And secure authentication, it's still secure because the codes that are returned on the first step, the user code and the access token, they work a kind of a password that links everything until we really authenticate and generate the tokens. And there is, of course, also the refresh token support allows the device to maintain access without requiring the user to reauthorize frequently, meaning that after the access token expires, the device can use the refresh token to get another one, and it will have the same time again until someone revokes the token on the authorization server. So this is the fifth flow that I want to talk about in our current series about OpenID/OAuth 2, and I hope it was really useful for you. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, share with your friends, put some comments, likes, things like that to give me motivation to continue my videos. But again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next videos.